Nathaniel Reed stood alone in a quiet school hallway, accused of stealing money he never touched. Students whispered. Teachers looked away. No one asked him for the truth. Then Liam Porter watched the video again and saw something no one else noticed. He didn't know that one small detail would expose a lie carefully hidden. He didn't know someone powerful was about to fall. But sometimes it only takes one person to see clearly, for the truth to rise. If this moment made you pause, tell me in the comments, would you have spoken up? A thin autumn wind drifted through the quiet halls of Redwood Falls High, carrying the scent of dust, old books, and something softer, like forgotten time. Nathaniel Reed moved slowly across the hallway floor, the mop gliding in steady arcs as if it had memorized the rhythm of his life. At 64, he carried himself with a quiet stiffness, not from age alone, but from years that had carved themselves into his bones. Once, he had worn a uniform that meant something. Now, he wore a faded maintenance shirt with his name stitched above the pocket, letters slightly frayed, like the respect people once had for him. He didn't mind the silence. In fact, he trusted it more than people. The school, with its chipped lockers and flickering lights, had become his world. He knew which doors creaked, which tiles were loose, which students walked with heavy hearts. But no one knew him, not really. To them, Nathaniel was just the janitor, a figure that appeared before sunrise and disappeared after dusk. That was how he preferred it, or at least that's what he told himself. The sound of heels clicking against the floor broke the quiet. Nathaniel glanced up briefly. Vivian Clark stood at the end of the hallway, newly arrived just days ago. She was in her early 30s, posture sharp, eyes observant in a way that felt less like curiosity and more like judgment. She carried herself like someone who had fought hard to be taken seriously and wasn't about to let anyone stand in her way. "Still working this late?" she asked, her tone neutral, but her gaze lingering. Nathaniel nodded once. "Always something to clean." She studied him for a moment longer than necessary, then turned and walked away. Nathaniel watched her go, something faint stirring in his chest. Not suspicion, not yet, just a quiet awareness. People like her didn't overlook details, and people like him were often treated like one. Days passed, each one blending into the next. Until the morning, everything shifted. The staff room door was open. Voices, sharp, tense, spilled into the hallway. "Money's gone," someone said. Nathaniel slowed his steps. A teacher stood by the desk, hands trembling slightly. "The fund envelope, it was right here yesterday." Vivian Clark stepped forward, her expression focused, controlled. Who had access? A few murmurs, a few shrugs. Then someone said it. "He was here late last night." The words didn't land loudly. They didn't need to. They found their way to Nathaniel anyway. All eyes turned. For a moment, time stretched thin. Nathaniel felt it, the weight of it. Not just the accusation, but something older, familiar. The kind of silence that came before judgment, not after truth. Vivian looked directly at him now. "Mr. Reed," she said, voice calm but firm. "You were the last one in this area, correct?" Nathaniel opened his mouth. He had been here. That was true. He had cleaned the room, emptied the bins, wiped the desk where the envelope had been. He had seen it, but he had not touched it. He began. And then a crash echoed down the hall, followed by a scream. "Lab room! Someone fell!" The tension shattered instantly. Chairs scraped, feet rushed. Nathaniel didn't think. He moved. His body remembered before his mind did, the instinct to run toward danger, not away from it. He reached the lab within seconds, finding a student on the floor, pale, breathing unevenly. A boy, 16 maybe, thin, shaken, a small cut near his temple. "Easy," Nathaniel said quietly, kneeling beside him. "You're all right. Stay with me." His hands were steady. They always were, when it mattered. Teachers gathered. Someone called for help. The moment swallowed everything else, including the accusation. But not for long. By the time the situation calmed, by the time the boy was taken to the nurse's office, something had already changed. Nathaniel returned to the hallway. The eyes were still there, Only now, they were colder. The question had not disappeared. It had only grown. Later that afternoon, security checked the cameras, or tried to. "The footage is missing," someone said. "From last night, that exact time." A silence followed, heavy, certain. Nathaniel stood there, and the faint smell of cleaning solution still clinging to his hands. No proof, no witness, just absence. And sometimes, absence was louder than any lie. He looked down at the floor he had just cleaned, and the surface shining faintly under the lights. For a brief moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Not anger, not fear. Something deeper. Like a man realizing that no matter how clean he made the world around him, some stains were never meant to come off. By the next morning, the silence Nathaniel once trusted had turned against him. It started as whispers, soft, uncertain, almost curious. Then it spread, faster than footsteps in a crowded hallway. A video, shaky and imperfect, captured the moment Vivian Clark had pointed at him. Someone had posted it. Someone had added a caption. Someone had decided the story was already finished. Nathaniel Reed didn't watch it. He didn't need to. He could feel it in the way conversations stopped when he entered a room, in the way students avoided brushing past him, in the way even the air seemed to shift. Subtle, but unmistakable. Suspicion had a presence. It lingered like a shadow that refused to move, no matter how much light you brought in. He continued working. The same hallway, the same mop, the same steady rhythm. Only now, every movement felt observed. "Is that him?" a voice whispered behind him. "I think so," another replied. Nathaniel kept his eyes down. Not out of guilt, but out of habit. Years ago, he had learned that looking people in the eye didn't always bring understanding. Sometimes, it just gave them something else to challenge. Across the courtyard, students gathered in small groups, phones in hand, laughter mixed with judgment, curiosity tangled with cruelty. For many of them, this wasn't a man, it was a story. And stories were easier to believe when they had a clear villain. Vivian Clark stood near the entrance, speaking quietly with another teacher. Her posture composed, her expression controlled. There was no hesitation in her voice now, no uncertainty. Whatever doubt she may have had before, it had been replaced. Nathaniel noticed, not the words, but the certainty. And certainty, he knew, could be more dangerous than lies. Near the lockers, a boy leaned against the wall, watching the video again. Liam Porter, 16, tall but slightly hunched, as if he had grown too fast for his own confidence. He wasn't the loud type, nor the kind who followed crowds without thinking. His father had once told him, after a small incident that had nearly gotten an innocent man blamed, "If something feels wrong, it probably is." That sentence had stayed with him longer than most lessons. Now, as he replayed the clip, something tugged at him. Not the accusation, not the words, but the background. He paused the video, zoomed in. There, just for a second, a faint movement behind the half-open staff room door. Not Nathaniel, not Vivian, someone else. Liam frowned, leaning closer, as if proximity might sharpen the truth. "Dude, what are you doing?" his friend asked, glancing over. "Nothing," Liam muttered, though his eyes didn't move from the screen, because it wasn't nothing. It was small, easy to miss, but it didn't belong. Back in the hallway, Nathaniel rinsed the mop slowly, watching the water swirl down the drain. The sound reminded him of something distant, rain on metal, years ago, in a place far from here. He blinked, pulling himself back. He had learned not to dwell, not on the past, not on what people thought, but something about this felt heavier, not because of the accusation itself, but because of how easily it had been accepted. Later that day, a student dropped a book near him. Normally, Nathaniel would pick it up without a word, offering a quiet nod. Today, the student hesitated before stepping closer, as if unsure. Nathaniel picked up the book anyway, held it out. The student took it quickly, avoiding eye contact. "Thanks," he said, almost under his breath. A small moment, but it lingered, because even kindness now carried distance. As the final bell rang, the halls emptied, leaving behind echoes and scattered light. Nathaniel remained, as he always did, finishing what others left undone. From across the courtyard, Liam watched him, not with suspicion, but with something else, a question. He looked down at his phone again. replaying that brief flicker of movement behind the door. Once, twice, 3 times. The more he watched, the less it looked like a coincidence. And the more it looked like the beginning of something no one else had noticed. Or maybe something no one else wanted to. The school felt different after the video spread. But to Liam Porter, it wasn't just the whispers that changed. It was the gaps between them. Gaps always meant something. That afternoon, Liam sat in the computer lab, the hum of old machines filling the air like a quiet pulse. Beside him was Ethan Cole, 17, broad-shouldered, practical, the kind of student who fixed things others gave up on. He had once rebuilt his father's broken truck engine from scratch, and ever since, he trusted evidence more than opinions. "You're still on that?" Ethan muttered, glancing at Liam's screen. Liam didn't look up. "Watch this part." He replayed the clip again, the moment Vivian accused Nathaniel. Then he paused, zoomed, enhanced. There it was, a shadow shifting behind the door. Ethan leaned closer, his expression sharpening. "That's not him." "I know," Liam said quietly. "What if it's just—" "It's not," Liam cut in, more certain than he expected. Silence stretched between them. Then Ethan sighed. "All right, so what are you thinking?" Liam hesitated. Not because he doubted the idea, but because he knew where it would lead. "We checked the other cameras," he said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You serious? That's school security stuff." Liam nodded slowly. "Exactly." Later that evening, when most of the staff had gone home and the hallways returned to their familiar emptiness, the two of them slipped into the administrative wing, not recklessly, carefully. Liam had memorized the layout over years of quiet observation. Some people walked through school. Others learned it. The security room door wasn't locked. That surprised them. Inside, monitors flickered faintly, casting pale light across rows of stored footage. Dust hung in the air like it hadn't been disturbed in days. Ethan sat down first, hands already moving across the keyboard. "If someone deleted footage," he murmured, "they didn't wipe everything. Systems like this, they leave traces." Minutes passed. Then, "Got something." Liam stepped closer. On the screen, a timestamp appeared, earlier than the moment Nathaniel had entered the staff room. They watched. A figure moved through the hallway. Not hurried, not nervous, controlled. The door opened. The figure stepped inside. Liam felt his chest tighten, not from surprise, but from confirmation, because he already knew. The footage sharpened just enough. Vivian Clark. Ethan leaned back slowly. "That's her." Neither of them spoke for a moment. It wasn't just what they saw, it was what it meant. Meanwhile, across town, Nathaniel Reed sat alone in his small apartment. The room was quiet, except for the faint ticking of an old clock mounted crookedly on the wall. He had never bothered to fix it. Some things, once broken, didn't need to be perfect to keep going. On the table in front of him lay a single object, a medal, worn at the edges, dulled by time, but still carrying a weight that the present refused to recognize. Nathaniel held it in his hand, turning it slowly. His fingers traced the surface, not as a reminder of pride, but of something steadier. Purpose. He remembered the day he received it. Not the ceremony, not the applause, but the silence after. The understanding that doing the right thing didn't always come with witnesses. He set the medal down gently. His reflection in the window looked older tonight. Not weaker, just more tired. Back at the school, Liam stared at the frozen frame on the screen. "Why would she do that?" Ethan asked. Liam didn't answer immediately, because the question wasn't simple, and the answer wouldn't be either. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows slightly, as if the building itself was reacting to what had just been uncovered. Inside, something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to change the direction of everything that came next. The video didn't explode all at once. It spread like a crack in glass, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. Liam hesitated before posting it, not because he doubted what he saw, but because he understood what it would do. Once something like this entered the world, it didn't come back. It didn't wait. It didn't ask permission. Ethan stood beside him, arms crossed. "If we're doing this," he said, "we don't stop halfway." Liam nodded, then pressed upload, At first, nothing. Then a few views. Then dozens. Then hundreds. By the next morning, Redwood Falls High no longer felt like a school. It felt like a courtroom without walls. Phones were everywhere. Conversations overlapped. Opinions sharpened. But this time, the direction had changed. Wait, that's Miss Clark, right? She was there before him. Then why did she? Questions replaced certainty, and uncertainty was louder. Vivian Clark stood near the staff room again, but something about her had shifted. The confidence that once framed her posture now felt tighter, more controlled, as if she were holding something together that wanted to fall apart. She answered questions calmly, her voice steady, but her eyes moved too often, scanning, calculating. Inside, something was unraveling. Principal Harold Bennett, a man in his late 50s with a measured voice and a habit of avoiding conflict, stepped into the situation reluctantly. Years ago, a decision he made too quickly had nearly cost a student their future. Since then, he had learned to delay judgment, but not always to question it deeply enough. Now, standing in front of staff and students, he felt that old mistake pressing against him again. "We will conduct a full investigation," he announced, his tone firm but strained. Until then, no conclusions should be made. But conclusions had already been made. They were just changing. Meanwhile, the video continued to circulate. Not just the new footage, but the older clips too. Angles, fragments, overlooked moments that now carried weight. A student named Rachel Kim, 15, observant and quiet, known for documenting everything through her phone, as if afraid moments might disappear, came forward with another recording. It showed Vivian near the staff room earlier that day, pacing, checking the hallway, unaware she was being filmed in the background of a casual video. Piece by piece, the story rebuilt itself, and it didn't look the same anymore. The administration called Vivian into a private office. The door closed. Time stretched. Outside, students waited, not because they cared about rules, but because something rare was happening. Truth wasn't being told. It was being uncovered. Inside the room, the air felt heavy. "You want to explain this?" Bennett asked, placing printed stills from the footage on the table. Vivian's eyes flickered downward for just a second, then back up. "I already told you," she said. "This is being taken out of context." Her voice didn't break, but something underneath it did. Bennett leaned forward slightly. "Then give me the context." Silence. For the first time, she didn't have immediate control of the room, and control had always been her anchor. Outside, Liam stood with Ethan, watching through the glass panel in the door, not hearing, but understanding. "Do you think she'll admit it?" Ethan asked. Liam shook his head slowly. "No, because some people didn't break when they were wrong. They doubled down, and Vivian Clark had built her life on not being the one who lost." Back inside, the silence thickened. Then Bennett spoke again, quieter now. "We've also reviewed financial records." That landed, not like a blow, like a weight. "You're under significant debt," he continued, "and the amount missing matches." Vivian's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. For a moment, the version of her that everyone had seen, the composed, precise teacher, wavered. Then, "It's a coincidence," she said. But the word felt thin, even to her, because deep down she knew something had shifted. Not just outside, inside. The walls she had built, carefully, over years, were beginning to crack, and this time there were witnesses. The rain came the night before the decision, soft at first, then steady, as if the sky itself had been holding something back for too long. By morning, Redwood Falls High stood washed clean, but not untouched. The announcement was made in the auditorium, where rows of students and staff sat beneath dim lights that hummed faintly overhead. No one spoke much. Even the usual restlessness of teenagers seemed muted, replaced by something heavier, something closer to awareness. Principal Harold Bennett stood at the podium, papers in hand, though he barely looked at them. His voice carried, steady but quieter than usual. "After a full investigation," he began, "we have determined that Ms. Vivian Clark was responsible for the missing funds and for falsely accusing Mr. Nathaniel Reed." The words settled slowly, not like thunder, like weight. "She has been dismissed from her position and will face further legal consequences." A murmur passed through the room, but it didn't grow. It faded quickly as if no one felt entitled to react too loudly anymore. Because this wasn't just about being right. It was about having been wrong. Vivian Clark was not there to hear it. She had left the campus the previous evening, escorted quietly, without the composure she once carried so carefully. There were no dramatic exits, no final words, just absence, the same kind she had once created for someone else. And now, that absence belonged to her. Nathaniel Reed stood at the back of the auditorium. He hadn't been asked to come. He had chosen to. Wearing the same worn shirt, the same quiet presence, he looked no different than he had days before. But something had shifted, not in how others saw him, but in how they no longer looked away. For the first time, the room noticed him. Not as a role, not as a shadow, but as a man. After the announcement, Bennett stepped down and approached him slowly. For a moment, he hesitated, as if searching for the right words in a space where words had already failed once. "Mr. Reed," he said, voice low, "we would like to offer you your position back, officially, and our apologies." Nathaniel looked at him, not with anger, not with relief, just with a quiet understanding that seemed older than the moment itself. "I appreciate that," he said, and he meant it, but appreciation wasn't the same as return. Bennett nodded, as if he already knew the answer before hearing it. Later that afternoon, something unexpected happened. It wasn't organized by the administration. It wasn't announced. It simply formed. Students gathered in the courtyard, standing in small groups at first, then closer together. Liam Porter stood near the center, hands in his pockets, his usual uncertainty replaced by something steadier. Beside him, Ethan leaned against a railing, silent but present. Rachel Kim held her phone, not recording this time, just watching. At the front, a small wooden bench had been cleared. Nathaniel approached slowly, unsure why he had been called there. No one clapped, no one cheered. Instead, there was silence. Respectful, intentional. Liam stepped forward. For a second, he hesitated. The same hesitation that had followed him his whole life when speaking up felt heavier than staying quiet. But this time, he didn't step back. "We were wrong," he said. "Simple, direct, real. And you didn't stop being who you are, even when we did." Nathaniel felt something shift in his chest. Not pride, not victory. Something softer. Something that didn't need a name. A girl stepped forward, no older than 15, and placed a small, folded note on the bench. Then another student did the same. Then another. Within minutes, the bench was covered. Notes, words, small pieces of recognition, written by hands that had once held doubt. Nathaniel looked at them, then at the students. For a moment, he said nothing, because sometimes silence wasn't emptiness. It was meaning. As the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Nathaniel turned slightly, his gaze drifting toward the gates of the school. He had spent years inside these walls, fixing, cleaning, holding things together quietly, but some things weren't meant to be held on to forever. He picked up one of the notes, folding it carefully into his pocket. Then he nodded once, to no one in particular, and to everyone at once, and walked, not away from something, but towards something else. The light followed him, stretching across the ground like a path that had been waiting longer than anyone realized. Behind him, the school stood quieter than it had ever been, not because something was lost, but because something had finally been understood. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or light. Sometimes they look like truth, refusing to stay buried. What happened to Nathaniel Reed was not just justice. It was a quiet reminder that God sees what the world ignores. When no one stood beside him, when every voice turned away, there was still something greater holding the line, unseen, but never absent. Because faith is not about being spared from hardship. It's about who you remain when hardship chooses you. In our daily lives, we may not face a moment like his, but we all face smaller versions of it. Being misunderstood, being judged, being overlooked. And in those moments, the question is never, will people believe me? The question is, will I still choose to do what is right? Nathaniel did, and maybe that's where the miracle truly lives. Not in the outcome, but in the quiet strength to endure until truth finds its way back. If this story touched something in you, take a moment to share it with someone who might need that reminder today. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been judged before anyone knew your truth? And if you believe that goodness still matters in this world, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so more stories like this can reach the people who need the most. May God watch over you, guide your path, and give you strength in the moments no one else sees.
If you enjoyed this story, don't go away. Drop a comment, tell us where you watching from, and subscribe to Hidden Black Tale for more.